Hi, Paul Dickson again. I am here today to describe a collection of vastly motley collection of American ephemera, which I've collected over the years, and which is composed of sort of two major things, which is a collection of real photography, White House photography, other named photographers, some very famous photographers, mostly of American presidents, some other American leaders. That's one component of the collection, which is rather large. With that, there's some early engravings, other things with presidents, but it's a substantial collection of portraiture with a lot of photographs, for example, of John F. Kennedy, most of which are signed by photographers who followed him, and Richard Nixon and Lyndon Johnson and others. Mostly modern. The photography was mostly modern, but it's very, very evocative stuff. The other material is a collection of show business. It's a collection of political. There's a lot of letters and speeches. There's the first printing of the Roosevelt's bank holiday speech. There are a lot of early press releases from the White House. There are a lot of letters from White House officials. It's just an amazing collection of ephemera. There's stuff in there from Bing Crosby, from Cab Calloway. These are from their organizations. Again, a lot of this is the graphic impulse, and a lot of this is just the letterheads and the connection with the famous people. There's stuff in there about Buffalo Bill Cody, some of which was written by a niece of his who was running the Cody Museum. And it's a big collection. Just to give you a couple highlights of the collection, I'll just mention a couple of pieces which I think are really sort of fun, which are indicative. These are among the rarer pieces in the collection. So this is a letter. I just got a great deal of fun out of this one. This was a letter written to the daughter of Mark Twain, whose name is Osip Gavrilovich. I believe that's Gavrilovich. You'll have to see it just to do it properly. Who is his daughter? She was married to a composer, and it was a letter from the Haskin Bureau asking her of Mark Twain's height. She then answers it and sends a letter. Her real name is C.C. Clara Clements, and again, I'm probably not doing it correctly. Osipor was her husband, who was the director of the Detroit Symphony, but her name was Clara Clements Gabrielovich. But again, that's sort of that's the kind of thing that's in here. I think my favorite thing in here is a letter from the famous newscaster, probably the most famous of his time, writing a letter about the softball league that was held in Paulding, New York, under the direction of Franklin D. Roosevelt. This was when this softball was first played at Hyde Park and at the different places. These softball games became front page news in the New York Times, and they talk about who is on the team. Gene Tunney, the famous boxer, catcher, Lowell Thomas, catcher, Lou Lair at first, the comedian, Resnick Pegler, the right-wing columnist, Secretary Morgenthau, Tom Dewey, governor of New York State and presidential campaign, humorist Ted Shane. Again, this was a time when what the president did was terribly important, and this was a marvelous piece of history. And there was actually a book written about this team, and their team was called the Nine Old Men, which of course was an allusion to the Supreme Court. But again, here's a whole series of letters that I just find fascinating. But about Buffalo Bill, they relate to the Buffalo Bill Museum. They are letters about Buffalo Bill himself. And again, these are just part of this collection. There's some ephemera from the Buffalo Bill Museum, and some very nice material. Again, I can't go through it all, but you get a sense that this was from a collection, the Haskins collection. He was a news gathering man, and he did personality columns all over the country. And here's one from the Cab Calloway Orchestra. Again, you can see the wonderful sort of graphics. Glenn Miller, of course, the great band leader. This is from his orchestra. And again, it's about the band. These are not just fan letters. This is about who's playing guitar, how old he is, where he got his training. Another about Glenn Miller. more about Glenn Miller. So again, they're not just this is where it's going to appear next. These are biographically significant. Bing Crosby, written by Larry Crosby. Question about Bing Crosby and whether he was a sponsor. He was sponsored by Cremo Cigar Company in 1930 and 31. Again, this is another one about Bing Crosby. So you'll begin to see, not all of these are show business. Damon Runyon. A lot of this stuff is about, here's a bunch of stuff about the Byrd Antarctic Exposition. None signed by Byrd himself, but it's all about the exhibition and fundraising for the exposition, including press releases and other material. So this is almost Ringling Brothers Circus. Ralph Peer is the guy who started, really was the beginning of country music when he first records in 1929 down in Tennessee, Bristol, Tennessee. They start recording Jimmie Rodgers, the singing brakeman. And it's really the beginning of the country western movement. Will Rogers Memorial material. This is information on Rogers. This is about a boxer named Kid McCoy he's in prison for. They're asking whether or not he's been paroled, and more material on McCoy clippings. So what this is Samuel Goldwyn. This is about Samuel Goldwyn, talking about For the Pride of the Yankees, wanting to know more about how the movie was being made. I could go on and on. There's again, it's ephemera, so not all of it's letters. These are early things about the use of how Negroes were treated in America. These were ephemeral. These were handouts. What does the Negro want? Negro Critic appraises the Institute's school. These were from, again, this is something from somebody who was on an Atlantic line. This is a letter to Alexander Wilcott. Sergei Rachmaninoff at Carnegie Hall. A lot on music and composers. Some presidential programs from inaugurals. Again, it's a real mixed bag, but it's been collected very carefully. You hear some early tickets from some exposition in Spain. So it's guests at the Democratic National Convention. So it's a lot of this is just stuff I've collected over the years, which I thought had a sort of a significant value in terms of American history. Here's a letter from a congressman talking about Andrew Jackson and the history of Andrew Jackson. Some early American paper. A copy of the Lincoln Reward poster. A thing about Millard Fillmore. Nobody knows anything about Millard Fillmore. But again, letters from. Here's a letter from from Princeton about Woodrow Wilson and his role as a football coach at Princeton. Warren G. Harding's speech of acceptance, which is extraordinary because when Harding is nominated, he's remembered as not one of our greatest presidents, but he does mention the rights of Negroes in his acceptance speech. Again, these are early addresses of Hoover. These are original copies of stuff from these early administrations. A lot on Hoover. These are letters from the White House, Secretary to Mrs. Hoover. They're about the presidents. There's a ton of Roosevelt material in here, including material on the armored car that they took with them to conferences in World War II, the specially built. And these are photographs of the armored car, along with the material on how they built the armored car. So again, the only coherent concept in this whole collection is it's stuff that fascinated me, that I collected over the years, and I thought was important. The President's Bank Proclamation, which is the original White House, on the original typewriter from the White House. Letters from the Ralph McGee, one of the famous members of Roosevelt's staff. Letters from early executive orders, and these are the original copies that were given to the press. There's some original stuff here from Eisenhower, original press releases. And again, there are letters about Roosevelt during the war, especially about how a president could be evacuated. Here's letters about Franklin D. Roosevelt's stamp collection. He was a great stamp collector. So you begin to see there's a lot in here about a question that Mrs. Roosevelt was Jewish, and there's a lot in here about her that whole discussion of their ethnicity, which is very interesting from a historical standpoint, because it was done by people answered were people of prominence. Department of Agriculture. This is an early letter from Milton Eisenhower, 1938, well before President Eisenhower. Again, these are Mrs. Harriman. This is early stuff. So you can begin to see there's just all sorts of stuff in here. The Secretary of the Governor. This is Alf Landon's secretary, and some inaugural material that I picked up over the years. Again, there's two big fat albums here of literally hundreds and hundreds of things, including a menu from the U.S. Capitol restaurant with the recipe for bean soup on the back. Two of those, and again some very early stuff that I just couldn't resist at different times to pick up. So, and these are early things on Mount Vernon, etc. So, and the final piece of the collection, which will be a lot easier to describe because it's so is just more presidential stuff. Some more, but also just a large collection of presidential photography. Here's John F. Kennedy drinking milk at a conference. But the bulk of this our collection is a collection of highly recognizable photographs of presidents and other leaders. Here's a president, a very famous photograph of Fabian Bachrach, photograph of Eisenhower. I'm just opening it. There's Harding. There's Lyndon Johnson. I'll go to Kennedy. Some wonderful stuff of Kennedy, and you'll see these are the classic photographs. Most of them are attributed. Jacques Lowe was a very famous photographer. His stuff sells a large amount of money individually. Here's another Kennedy, the famous cigar. This was a White House photo. This is the City News Bureau, which is a famous group here in town. That was their picture. This was, again, a local photographer took a picture of Kennedy. This was from the Highway Users. This is a picture of Kennedy playing softball with Mike Mansfield and Scoop Jackson. Kennedy, the famous picture of John. And again, most of these have the original attribution on the back of them from the photographer. And people like John L. Lewis. Again, this was something. There was some wonderful Nixon material here, but photographs of Nixon at different events. And again, most of them are signed on the back. Again, this is Dickson himself. So again, and this goes along with a lot of other sort of additional things which I've collected over the years. Photographs of famous people, John L. Lewis, Eugene McCarthy, and then engravings, original engravings, mounted, which I've used in book illustrations, but Woodrow Wilson, John Quincy Adams, Truman, etc. And there's a copious number of these engravings, some of which are simple, just sort of copies, but some of them are, most of them are in fact significantly from early engravings that were collected. So again, this is the collection. I call this the Ephemera Extravaganza.